I am Amy Snyder, age 27, residing with my parents. Our family of 3 has always lived together harmoniously. From my childhood, I've held my father in high regard. His bustling business keeps him occupied, causing him to be rarely home. Nevertheless, he diligently returns to spend time with me during his days off, making him an exceptional father. However, my mother's role is quite different. She's never engaged in paid work during my memory span. While she manages household affairs, she hasn't actively contributed to my father's business nor pursued external employment. Our comfortable lifestyle is evident, as she frequently socializes while adorned fashionably. Despite her active social life, I've never aspired to emulate her. She hasn't displayed a fondness for children and rarely focused on me. Although I experienced occasional loneliness, my father's presence always mitigated that emptiness. It seems my father comprehended my mother's indifference and made it his mission to ensure I never felt neglected or isolated, at least that's my belief. I recall times when my mother would promise to spend time with me, but those commitments often went unfulfilled. Initially, these disappointments brought me to tears. Yet, I learned as a child not to treat her promises as genuine ones. In contrast, my father's commitments were steadfast and dependable. This consistent reliability shaped my growing admiration for him. This affection eventually led me to aspire to join his business after completing my studies. Being an only child, I envisioned myself inheriting his business and continuing his legacy. By age 20, my father began mentoring me over drinks, imparting valuable lessons. My mother's involvement remained shallow, only intervening significantly during my sophomore year of college. When I expressed my desire to work at my father's company after graduation, she dismissed the notion. In her view, a woman should find a capable husband to provide for her. I realized my mother's perspective was limited and chose to forge my path. I pursued my studies fervently throughout college, maintaining my resolve to become an independent woman. I joined my father's company after graduating, even though I couldn't sway my mother's opinion. Eventually, she relented, expressing her concerns about my chosen path. While she cautioned me about the challenges, I persevered. My mother's attitude distanced us further as I delved deeper into the corporate world alongside my father. As I joined my father's company, he devoted considerable effort to my training, imparting invaluable knowledge. Unbeknownst to me, he was unwell. Over 6 months, he provided thorough guidance and introduced me to key stakeholders. Tragically, he collapsed at our workplace due to his illness. Hospitalized and fighting his condition, I took on more responsibility. I remember his concern about the company's future in his absence. His condition strained us, but I assured him that with the support of the team, we'd prevail. His trust in me was evident, and it only bolstered my determination to carry on his legacy. The journey wasn't easy, but his faith in me guided my decisions. Despite my mother's reservations, I pressed on, determined to prove my capabilities and succeed in his absence. If it's going to be like that, then as long as you, as a woman, don't take over as the second generation and drive the company to bankruptcy, it would be unfortunate. So, be prepared for that. Mom, you don't seem to have any real interest or affection for the company. Your concerns seem to revolve around what others might think, and that's disheartening to hear. During the period when my father's health deteriorated, I often found myself in arguments with my mom. My father would visit the company on his better days, his strength gradually waning over the course of 5 years. During his last year, he was almost confined to his bed. On one such occasion, he said, "This company and its employees are treasures to me, but I have to let go of my treasure, Amy. Over these past few years, I've observed you working diligently. I believe I can entrust it to you. Can I ask you to safeguard this place and everyone here for me?" I wasn't sure if I could be like my dad, but I resolved to strive towards that goal and get closer to the person I had always admired, to put his worries at ease. From that day, the mantle of leadership was passed on to me. With the mounting responsibilities, I found myself with scarce time to be at home. While my father was primarily hospitalized, I made every effort to visit him regularly. My mother, however, seemed to manage only the bare essentials, even appearing somewhat bothered by that. I couldn't help but wonder about my mother's feelings towards my father. Did she harbor no gratitude, compassion, or pity for his sickness? It was hard to fathom, especially when I remembered how tirelessly he worked for me during my upbringing. Despite my own exhaustion, I made an earnest effort to be there for him as he was for me. This routine persisted for about a year until he peacefully passed away in his sleep. Amidst the numerous tasks that engulfed me, I barely had time to grieve. My mother, unaware of these demands, assumed that I could handle everything, from funeral arrangements to hospital paperwork. Facing reality, I knew that my mother, who had never engaged in anything beyond being a homemaker, would be ill-equipped to manage such matters. Hence, I took it upon myself to attend to these responsibilities without protest. Soon after the funeral, my mother approached me. "Amy, the funeral's done. You've settled things now, haven't you?" She seemed almost dismissive. It was evident that she considered me expendable now that she had inherited 200 million yen. This was the moment I had been anticipating, and I had already made up my mind. The next day, I initiated my departure. I quickly sold all my belongings and arranged my exit. To her surprise, I was efficient, but what she didn't know was that I held a secret. My father had entrusted all financial matters to me. The money was mine by right, and there was none left for her. Before his health declined, my father had made his wishes clear. "Your mother doesn't understand financial management or responsible spending. I want you to provide her with a monthly allowance. If she ever demands a lump sum, deny her." Though it seemed drastic, I had been given strict instructions. Additionally, my father handed me an SD card containing a video message from him to my mother. I had never thought I'd have to use it, but given her recent behavior, it was a possibility I had to consider. After I left the spacious house, my mother's sole dwelling place, I anticipated that she would contact me soon. However, her urgency exceeded my expectations. "Come home immediately." I was taken aback, struggling to comprehend her words as I focused on my work. "I need to talk to you urgently. Please come quickly." With those words echoing, I made my way to my childhood home, holding the SD card. Upon laying eyes on me, my mother began her accusations. "You must have run off with your father's inheritance. I sensed something was amiss when you left in such a hurry. Hand over your father's inheritance to me right now. How selfish can you be? You can't even act properly." My response was to hand her the SD card, and as she questioned its contents, I calmly retrieved my laptop, inserted the card, and played the video. On the screen appeared my father, radiating the vitality he used to possess. I was curious about my mother's reaction to this video letter, so I left the room quietly, wondering how she would respond. Upon my return, I found my mother in tears. It was astonishing to witness my mother crying as she watched a video of my late father. With concern, I asked, "Mom, are you all right?" She responded, "Yes, for now. I understand. I will abide by your father's instructions and leave everything to you from now on. Please go home for today. Call me when you've calmed down." It seemed clear that my mother didn't want me to witness her vulnerability. Respecting her wishes, I left promptly that day, my mind brimming with questions. I was eager to comprehend how my father had managed to silence my mother, but the answers eluded me. Nearly a month elapsed without communication from my mother. Worried, I decided to visit my parents' house during my lunch break. Unfortunately, my mother wasn't home. Determined to connect, I returned later that evening. The illuminated windows were reassuring. Apologetic for my unexpected visit, I explained my concerns. My mother offered an unexpected revelation. "I'm sorry, I was out at my part-time job during the day." A part-time job for my mother was a concept I had never entertained. She was someone I believed would never engage in work. How had things come to this? My curiosity deepened, especially since my mother's behavior seemed to have shifted after watching the video. Curious and apprehensive, I accepted the SD card from my mother. Taking it home, I finally decided to view the video myself. As I observed my mother's unusual conduct, I found myself back in the office, seated at my father's desk, preparing to play the video. The recording began, and my father's familiar voice filled the room. He thanked my mother for her role in raising me and acknowledged her commitment to our family and the company. However, an unexpected turn emerged as my father addressed a profound aspect of my mother's life. "You've cared for Amy, even though she's not your biological child, and for that, I'm grateful. But in the process, you've put your dreams on hold, and you've reached this age without establishing your own means of livelihood. I take responsibility for allowing you to lead a life of comfort." My father's words caught me off guard, and I found myself blurting out, "I'm not my mother's child." The revelation was startling and yet began to make sense. Despite her reserved demeanor, my mother had been cooking for me daily and tending to my needs, all for a child who wasn't her own. As the video continued, my father disclosed that he hadn't officially registered their marriage due to my mother's concerns about her sister. Consequently, he had supported her financially, ensuring she wanted for nothing, but that meant she hadn't forged her path. The gravity of his words hit me as he expressed his concerns about her future once he was gone. It was a revelation that shook the foundation of what I knew about my family. To witness my articulate father unraveling these revelations was both perplexing and overwhelming. His words unearthed a reality I hadn't comprehended, casting new light on my mother's role and my family's dynamics. My father recounted our family's history and his aspirations for our future during a long conversation. I spent the entire night pondering these revelations. The next day, I approached my mother with a clearer perspective. "Mom, I watched Dad's video yesterday. I know everything now. You raised me because you were asked to, right?" My mother responded, "Yes, that's correct." "What happened to my biological mother?" She shared that I was my aunt and father's child. Tragically, my aunt passed away shortly after giving birth to me, and my mother, stepping in, vowed to raise me as her own. This newfound understanding filled the gaps in my imagination. My mother had once worked in a diner where my father was a regular customer. She was lively and ambitious, dreaming of owning her own diner. But when she took on the role of my mother, she put her dream on hold. My father's mention of her dormant aspiration reignited her determination, and now she's training as a part-timer to make her dream a reality. Realizing my own lack of knowledge and involvement, I apologized. My mother assured me it wasn't my fault and confessed that she struggled with motherhood due to her inexperience. This conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. After many heartfelt discussions, we decided to use my father's remaining funds to support her diner's launch. As she worked diligently, a newfound humility emerged. I contributed while maintaining my regular job, strengthening our bond. This collaborative effort allowed us to grow closer, forging a relationship I had never imagined. She managed her living expenses independently, refusing my father's inheritance to sustain her pride. She asked me to inform her if I faced difficulties, upholding my father's trust in me. In return, I promised to support her diner, an endeavor that brought us together. Years later, my mother's diner opened, and her dream was realized. Witnessing her determination reminded me of my own youthful dreams. With my father's legacy as motivation, I cherished our growing closeness. My mother expressed gratitude for my role in her journey, and we began building a real family. With the truth about my adoption now known, I embraced the reality and chose to continue living with my mother. Observing her concerns for my well-being, I contemplated moving back home. My father's house, company, and inheritance were my responsibilities, but my newfound bond with my mother became my priority. We visited the graves of my father, my biological mother, my aunt, and my mother's sister to share updates about our daily lives. My adoption was officially recognized, marking the completion of this transformative journey.